There is a particular kind of tiredness that does not want silence. It wants a voice it already knows, saying things it has heard before, in a place it has already visited. Gravity Falls is well suited to this. The pines outside the mystery shack, the hum of the golf cart, the specific cadence of a twin brother reading aloud from a journal he does not fully understand. All of it arrives softened when you are half awake. You are not watching for the plot. You know the plot. What remains is texture. The warmth of Grunkle Stan grumbling in the next room of your mind. The small mechanical creak of a summer that ended years ago and keeps not ending. Sleep comes easier to the familiar, and few shows made their familiarity as dense as this one. Tonight is about the episodes that live at the edges of that fondness. Not the celebrated ones that fans quote and rank and defend, but the quieter entries, the ones the aggregators place near the bottom and the blogs single out as the weakest, the episodes fans do not talk about. There is a strange comfort in the overlooked, and we will spend this long night inside it. Welcome to Pine Hat. This is a place for the second watch and the third, for the hours when the story matters less than the company it keeps. Settle where you are. Let the lamp go low or off entirely. Loosen whatever you are still holding on to from the day. You do not have to follow closely, and you do not have to stay awake. The narration will move slowly and evenly from one forgotten episode to the next. And if you drift somewhere in the middle of a sentence, that is precisely the point. Nothing here will jolt you. There are no surprises left in these woods for you, only the shape of them in the dark, and that shape is enough to rest inside. There is a strange comfort in the idea that a show as beloved as Gravity Falls has a bottom. Every series does. Somewhere in every catalog there are episodes people forget they have seen, episodes that rank lowest when the fans themselves are asked to line the whole run-up from best to worst. This video is not about the moments that made Gravity Falls famous. It is about the other end of the list, the quiet floor, the handful of half-hours that keep appearing at the bottom of rewatch threads and aggregator rankings, and the long, patient wiki traffic that measures which pages people actually return to. What follows is not a complaint. It is closer to a study of gravity, of what sinks and why. Consider first how little separates the bottom of this particular show from its middle. On the aggregator site Episode.Ninja, which builds its rankings from viewer scores across its database, the single lowest-rated Gravity Falls episode is a Season 2 entry called Little Gift Shop of Horrors, and it sits at 7.74 out of 10. Read that number again, 7.74. On most shows, that would be a respectable score, a solid night. Here it is the floor, and the 8 episodes stacked just above it are barely higher. The whole bottom cluster on that site, 9 episodes in total, falls between 7.74 and 8.0, which is to say the distance from worst to nearly worst is a matter of a few hundredths of a point. That episode, then The Love God, Roadside Attraction, The Legend of the Gobblewonker, The Hand That Rocks the Mabel, Bottomless Pit, Boss Mabel, The Deep End, and Sock Opera. That is the basement. It is a very small, very crowded room. Think about what that tightness means. When the worst episodes of a series still score close to 8, it does not really have bad episodes in the ordinary sense. What it has instead is a set of episodes that are merely less loved, and the ranking exists to sort degrees of good rather than to separate good from bad. The people who make these lists are not warning anyone away. They are doing something more delicate. They are noticing which halves of the run fade fastest from memory and trying to say why. A different measuring stick tells a slightly different story. Screen Rant, working not from an aggregator but from IMDb's own user ratings, compiled a list of the 10 worst episodes and put a Season 1 episode at the very bottom. That episode is Boys Crazy, rated 7.5 in their listing, the lowest single-number Screen Rant found across the whole series. It is worth sitting with the fact that the two sources do not agree on the worst episode at all. One method crowns a Season 2 oddity, the other a Season 1 entry. When the floor is this flat, the identity of the very lowest tile depends heavily on which crowd you ask and how their votes are counted. Just above Boys Crazy on Screen Rant's IMDb-based ranking sits a small tier of episodes all clustered around 8.0, The Legend of the Gobblewonker, Headhunters, Dipper vs. Manliness, Little Dipper, Boss Mabel, and the Season 2 gift shop entry, gathered together a hair above the bottom. Notice how names begin to repeat across the two lists. Boss Mabel appears on both. So does that gift shop oddity. The Legend of the Gobblewonker appears on both. The methods differ, but a few episodes keep surfacing no matter how you count, and those are the ones worth watching over the course of this video. Now leave the aggregators for a moment and listen to a single human voice, because sometimes an argued opinion cuts deeper than a score. In 2016, the entertainment blog Rotoscopers published an opinion piece bluntly titled Gravity Falls, the Worst Episodes, and its author named 5 as the weakest of the entire run. Roadside Attraction, Dipper vs. Manliness, Boys Crazy, Boss Mabel, and The Deep End. Again, the overlap is telling. Boys Crazy, the IMDb floor. Boss Mabel, on every list so far. This is not one grumpy writer picking at random. It is a handwritten list arriving from a completely different direction at many of the same doors the crowds arrived at. Two of those doors the Rotoscopers piece pushes open with real force. Of a Season 1 episode called The Deep End, the writer says, in effect, that it is the closest the show ever gets to being bad, describing it as neither funny nor especially interesting, an episode that does not fail loudly so much as fail to register at all. And of a late Season 2 episode, Roadside Attraction, the same piece goes further and calls it the most useless episode in the series, arguing that its plot points simply do not pay off by the time the finale arrives. Useless is a hard word, but it points at something specific. Not that the episode is unpleasant, but that it is disconnected, that it sets things in motion and then lets them go nowhere the larger story ever picks up again. That charge of disconnection turns out to be the liveliest thread in the whole floor, and another writer followed it much further. The Mary Sue ran an episode-by-episode rewatch column, a slow walk through the series 1/2 hour at a time, and when it reached Roadside Attraction, it noticed two things that no score could capture. The first is geographic. Roadside Attraction is the only episode in the entire series where Dipper and Mabel leave the town of Gravity Falls entirely, trading the woods and the Mystery Shack for an ordinary Oregon road trip. Every other adventure is rooted in that one strange place. This one pulls the twins out of the soil that the series grows in and drives them down the highway to somewhere the story does not otherwise go. The second thing the column noticed is quieter and, to my mind, more damning than any low rating. There is an in-universe tie-in book called Journal 3 that gathers and references the events of the series, weaving most of the episodes back into the larger fiction so that even small adventures leave a mark on the record. Nothing from Roadside Attraction appears in it. The book, which remembers so much, does not remember this. Consider what that absence means when you place it beside the aggregator scores and the useless label. An episode that leaves town, whose plot points never pay off, and which the show's own supplementary canon quietly declines to acknowledge. The rankings called it low. The tie-in book, in its silence, agreed. And this is really the shape of the whole floor, once you look at it steadily. These are not episodes that went wrong in any dramatic way. The Gift Shop Oddity and The Deep End do not crash. Boss Mabel and Boys Crazy do not embarrass anyone. What they share is something softer and harder to forgive, a tendency to sit slightly outside the main current, to be the half hours that the memory, and sometimes even the canon, lets drift. That is why they cluster so tightly at the bottom, all within a few hundredths of each other. Because none of them is bad, and all of them are, in some small way, forgettable. Over the rest of this video, we will walk through them one at a time, slowly, in the low light, and ask what each of them was reaching for, and why so many people, counting so many different ways, keep setting them gently at the bottom of the pile. There is a particular kind of insecurity that only a twin can feel, and it is the engine of the 11th episode of Gravity Falls, an episode people tend to misplace. Many viewers assume it is the 10th, slotting it a notch earlier in the season than it actually sits. It is the 11th. It arrived on Disney Channel on the 28th of September, 2012, in the middle of a first season that was still teaching audiences what this show intended to be. And it has settled since into a quiet middle stretch of the run that lore videos and character studies almost never stop on. That neglect is worth pausing over, because the episode opens on one of the most human problems the series ever hands its lead. Dipper discovers that Mabel has grown. Not much, a single millimeter, but an inch is enough to reorganize a person's sense of himself when that person has spent his whole life measured against a sibling born minutes apart. The story frames it in the language Dipper reaches for in his own anxiety. The fear that this small physical difference makes Mabel the alpha twin, the one who leads, the one who is looked to first. Think about what that phrase carries for a child. It is not really about height, it is about rank, about the private hierarchy that exists inside a pair of siblings who are otherwise treated as a single unit, two halves of one greeting card. Dipper has decided, without much evidence, that the taller twin wins, and that he is losing. What makes this a Gravity Falls story rather than an ordinary sitcom story is where he takes that anxiety. He does not sulk it out or talk it through. He turns to the journal. Somewhere in the pages of the third book, he finds an entry describing a place in the forest where the animals change size, a spot the author had cataloged the way he catalogs everything strange in this town. Following that page leads Dipper to a crystal, and the crystal has a peculiar and elegant property. Light passing through one side of it shrinks whatever it touches. Light passing through the other side makes that thing grow. The direction of the beam decides the outcome. It is a clean piece of invented physics, the kind this cartoon liked to build its plots around, a single object with two opposite powers depending only on how you hold it. Consider how neatly that mirrors the emotional problem underneath the episode. Here is a boy consumed by the difference between larger and smaller, between the one who grows and the one who shrinks in comparison, and the forest hands him an object whose entire nature is exactly that binary, bigger on one side, smaller on the other, and the child gets to choose which. The writing does not underline this. It does not need to. The connection sits there for anyone awake enough to notice it, and it does not punish anyone who drifts past it. Dipper does the thing a resourceful and slightly desperate child would do. He rigs the crystal into a flashlight, building himself a makeshift growth ray, a tool whose only purpose is to make him taller than his sister. There is something both clever and a little sad about that image. The same instinct that makes Dipper the investigator of the series, the one who reads the journal and follows its leads and tinkers strange objects into working machines, is here bent entirely toward a cosmetic anxiety. He has all the ingenuity of a young scientist, and he is spending it to win an argument about who stands higher in a doorway. The writers trust the audience to hold both of those truths at once, to admire the resourcefulness and to see how small the goal is. The episode credits its construction to more hands than one. It was written by Tim McKeon, Zach Paez, and Alex Hirsch, and directed by Joe Pitt alongside Aaron Springer. That is worth holding in mind, because episodes like this one, the middle season pieces that the retrospectives skip, are often where a writing team works out the texture of a series away from the pressure of a premiere or a finale. Hirsch's name appears on the writing, as it does across so much of the first season, but the shared credit is a reminder that the show's voice was a collaboration, assembled by a room of people figuring out, week by week, how much emotional weight a size-changing crystal could carry. Then the story does what Gravity Falls so often does. It takes a private problem and lets it slip out of the character's control. The growth ray, this fragile little instrument Dipper has built for his own quiet vanity, becomes the object of a physical fight between the two twins. Brother and sister struggle over the flashlight, and in the scramble it leaves their hands entirely and falls into the possession of Leal Gideon. The plot pivots on that single loss of grip. A tool made to settle a squabble between siblings passes to someone else. Someone whose interest in a device that can shrink or enlarge anything is not going to be as innocent as Dipper's. Gideon is voiced by Thurup Van Orman, and that casting is one of the small pleasures of the early series. Van Orman, a creator and performer with his own sensibility for the strange and the sweet, gives Gideon a voice that can sit on the line between charming and unsettling, the syrup and the threat in the same breath. To hand a character like that an object of pure size-based power after the episode has spent its first act establishing exactly how much a change in size can mean, is a setup with real menace folded into it. The crystal was dangerous enough as a vanity project. In the hands of someone with actual ambitions, it becomes something else. And the episode has earned that turn by taking Dipper's smaller anxieties seriously first. There is a lesson in structure here for anyone who cares how these stories are built. The episode does not begin with the villain. It begins with a boy measuring himself against his sister and finding himself wanting. The threat arrives only after we understand the desire, and the threat arrives specifically because of that desire, because Dipper wanted the crystal badly enough to fight over it and lose it. The plot machinery and the emotional machinery are the same machinery. You cannot separate the fear of being the smaller twin from the loss of the flashlight, because the fear is what put the flashlight in play. Audiences have been fond of this one over the years, more than its neglect in the video essays would suggest. It holds a rating of 7.8 out of 10 on the largest of the film and television databases, drawn from somewhere in the region of 4,200 viewer scores. That is not the number of a beloved landmark episode, and it is not meant to be. It is the number of a solid, well-liked middle-season entry, the sort of episode that a certain kind of fan will name as an underrated favorite precisely because it is not the one everybody talks about. 7.8 is the rating of an episode that does its job and does it with more care than the season slot around it would lead you to expect. And that, in the end, is the case for stopping here at all, on an episode that the lore compilations and the character arc retrospectives tend to hurry past. The dramatic weight of Gravity Falls usually gets assigned to its mysteries and its finales, to the moments where the larger story lurches forward. But the 11th episode of the first season understands something the flashier hours sometimes forget, that the smallest fears are the ones that make characters act, and that a boy worried about a single inch will reach into the strangest corners of a magical forest, build himself a machine, fight his own sister for it, and lose it to the last person who should ever hold it. The crystal changes size. So does Dipper's whole sense of the ground beneath him, and the episode begins from that quiet, ordinary ache before it ever lets the danger in. The 14th episode of that debut season carries a title that ends in an exclamation point, though the episode itself is one of the quietest, most sidelong things the series ever attempted. Bottomless Pit was written by Alex Hirsch with Mike Rianda, Joe Pitt, and Aaron Springer sharing the directing credit, and it went out on the Disney Channel on the 1st of March, 2013. 3.45 million people watched it that night. It earned a modest rating in the 18 to 49 bracket. Those are the numbers of a show doing exactly what it was supposed to do, on schedule, filling a slot. And that, in a way, is the whole point of the thing, because Bottomless Pit is a filler episode, and it knows it. TV Tropes files it among its anthology format installments, meaning a single framing device holds together several short stories that otherwise have nothing to do with one another. The frame is simple. Stan is trying to throw out a stack of unwanted complaint cards, a gust of wind catches him, and Stan, Dipper, Mabel, and Suze tumble together into the bottomless pit behind the Mystery Shack. They fall. And because they are falling, and because there is nothing else to do while falling, they pass the time by telling each other stories. Consider what a framing device like that actually is, from the standpoint of the people building the episode. It is scaffolding. It is a way to hang a set of unrelated ideas on one nail so the audience does not notice they are unrelated. The pit is not a place. It is a container. Nobody in the writer's room believed the emotional weight of the season would live or die on whether the characters escaped a hole in the ground. The hole is an excuse, a held breath, a stretch of empty time that the crew fills deliberately, because the show, at that moment in its production, needed a stretch of empty time filled. What makes this episode genuinely interesting is what it almost was. By some fan accounts, Bottomless Pit may have started life as a full bottle episode, an experiment with no backgrounds at all. Think about the nerve of that idea. A cartoon whose entire visual identity is its setting, the trees and the woods and the cluttered wooden shack, proposing to strip all of that away and see if the characters could carry a whole episode against nothing. It is the kind of formal dare that a confident young production makes when it wants to prove it can do more with less, and it did not hold up. As the story goes, the crew tried it. The emptiness did not work, and the idea was set aside. What survived was the compromise. If the episode could not be one bottle, it could be a shelf of small bottles instead. A set of separate mini-stories loosely corked together by the fall. So the filler was engineered twice. First as an ambitious constraint, then, when the constraint failed, as a recovery. That is a more honest origin than most filler ever admits to. The episode you actually watch is the second draft of an experiment, and the anthology shape is not a lazy default, but the shape the crew retreated to when their harder idea collapsed. The stories themselves are small on purpose. Dipper tells one called Voiceover, in which he drinks an expired voice-changing formula from Old Man McGucket, and comes away with a deep announcer's voice. He uses it to prank call people, and then, at the end, he lets it go and accepts his own cracking puberty voice again. It is a complete little arc, a want and a lesson, sized to fit a segment. Notice how self-contained it has to be. A listener who drifted off during Stan's fall and woke during Dipper's story would lose nothing, because the story asks nothing of what came before it. Suze tells the next one, and it runs on the same modest engine. He sets out to beat the high score on Stan's Western-themed pinball machine, cheats by tilting it, and is pulled inside the machine for his trouble. To get out and to save Dipper and Mabel, he gives up the very high score he came for. Again, the shape is clean and closed. A desire, a transgression, a small sacrifice, an exit. These are not stories that deepen the mythology of the town or advance the long mystery the series is famous for. They are exercises. They are the crew practicing scales. And then there is Stan's story, which is the sharpest of the three precisely because it is the least eventful. Stan gives a self-aggrandizing account of supposedly winning a football championship, and almost nothing happens in it. It is a tall tale, thin and inflated, a man narrating his own greatness into a hole in the ground where no one can check the facts. There is something quietly perfect about placing that particular story inside this particular episode. Filler about a man filling silence with a story that may not even be true. The episode does not comment on this. It simply lets Stan talk, and lets the pit swallow the words the way it swallowed everyone else's. Step back and look at how all of it fits the frame. The complaint cards that started the fall are themselves a joke about unwanted things, about material that gets thrown out. The characters are literally in the process of discarding when they are pulled down into an episode that the writers designed to be, in its own way, discardable, that is not an accident of tone. That is a production consciously building something skippable and being unbothered by the fact. Because a 13 or 20 episode season needs its valleys as much as its peaks. And a good crew knows how to make a valley that still passes pleasantly. The recent conversation around this show tends to reach for the heavy episodes, the frightening ones, the moments where the writers pushed further than a children's network usually allows. Bottomless Pit is the opposite kind of artifact, and it deserves attention for the opposite reason. It is the episode where you can watch a show decide, on purpose, to coast for 20 minutes and do it with enough craft that the coasting has a shape. The anthology structure was not the plan. It was the safety net. And the safety net turned out to be strong enough to hold three little stories, one falling family, and one man's untrue football triumph all suspended together over a hole with no bottom, going nowhere, taking their time. By the time Blendan Blandine says his own name aloud, the show has already been lying to you for 8 episodes. He is there in the very first installment, in Tourist Trapped, a silent figure in the background, a man drawn into a crowd scene with no more emphasis than a lampist or a passing tourist. You are not meant to notice him. Most people do not. And then, weeks later, in the 9th episode of that debut year, that same forgettable man steps forward and becomes something the series has been building toward all along. The episode is called The Time Traveler's Pig. It first aired on the 24th of August, 2012, on the Disney Channel, written by Ori Wallington with Alex Hirsch, with Joe Pitt and Aaron Springer at the helm. On its surface, it is a light thing, a story set at a fair, the kind of episode a casual viewer files under comedy and forgets. That is exactly the trick the series is playing. Underneath the fairground lights, it is laying the first stone of the machinery that will eventually carry the entire finale. The moment of revelation is small and almost sheepish. Dipper, suspicious of a stranger who seems to be watching the twins too closely, accuses the man of spying on them. The accusation is what breaks the disguise. The man reveals himself as Blendan Blandine, a time traveler, and he explains, in effect, that he has been sent to fix time anomalies occurring at the Mystery Fair. He is not a villain. He is a bureaucrat of time, a maintenance worker for the timeline, dispatched to repair problems before they spread. Think about what that framing does. It tells you, this early, that Gravity Falls is a place where time itself develops faults, and that there are people whose job is to come back and seal them. His tool is a joke, and the joke is the point. The time machine does not look like a machine. It takes the form of an ordinary tape measure, and the series calls it a time tape. There is something deliberate in that choice. A tape measure is the dullest object imaginable, a thing for measuring distance, and here it measures something else entirely, the distance between one moment and another. The device that can unravel and reweave history is dressed as hardware store clutter. You could hold it and never know. Blendon, to his credit, understands the danger. When Dipper asks to borrow the time tape, he refuses, calling it too dangerous to lend. That refusal is the correct instinct, and the episode punishes him for abandoning it. He is won over, not by argument, but by kindness, or the appearance of it. Mabel gives him fare tickets, a small gift, freely offered, and it disarms him completely. He wants to ride an attraction, the way anyone at a fair might, and so he sets the most dangerous object in the story down and walks away from it. He leaves it briefly unattended. That is all the opening the twins need. What follows is the oldest shape of a time travel story, and it knows it. While Blendon is distracted on the ride, Dipper and Mabel steal the time tape. They begin using it the way children would, for do-overs, small corrections, second attempts at moments that did not go their way. And through those repeated do-overs, layered one on top of another, they accidentally cause the exact time anomalies Blendon had been sent to prevent. Sit with the cruelty of that structure for a moment. The disruption he traveled back to fix is created by the theft of the very device meant to fix it. The problem is its own cause. The Guardian's carelessness produces the disaster the Guardian was guarding against. It is a closed loop, and the series hands it to you inside an episode most viewers remember only for the pig. There is more hidden in the frame than the story admits out loud. Blendon's suit is a piece of technology called a chronoflage suit, a garment meant to camouflage him across time, and in this episode it malfunctions. When it glitches, it does not simply flicker. It briefly displays glimpses of other places. For an instant, you can see the sap-preserved dinosaur cave that will later be fully explored in Land Before Swine, and the arcade that appears in Fight Fighters. These are not decoration. They are the series showing you its own future on the surface of a broken costume, planting images you cannot yet decode, trusting that some viewer, someday, on a second or a fifth viewing, will freeze the frame and recognize what they are looking at. It is a form of confidence most cartoons never attempt. And there is one more first buried here, easy to miss. Time Baby, the strange ruler of the Time Travel Authority, had been mentioned once before, spoken of but never seen, as early as the episode Irrational Treasure. Mentioned is not the same as shown. His actual visual first appearance in the series comes here, in The Time Traveler's Pig. So this single Fairground episode gives you, almost in passing, the first sight of the timeline's police force and the first sight of the being who commands them. A great deal of the show's cosmology arrives dressed as filler. It is worth pausing on the voice, because it carries a strange afterlife. Blendon Blandon is voiced by Justin Roiland, who would go on to co-create Rick and Morty, another story built almost entirely out of time and dimension and the consequences of tampering with both. There is a small irony in that. The nervous, apologetic timekeeper of Gravity Falls, the man who cannot hold on to his own device, is voiced by the person who would later build an entire universe out of the reckless misuse of exactly this kind of technology. You can hear, in that casting, two different attitudes toward the same premise sitting side by side. What the channel has circled before in its videos on villains getting what they deserved, and on the series going further than a children's program should, tends to treat Blendon as a punchline, the hapless figure who keeps losing. That reading is not wrong, but look at him through the lens of the machinery instead of the comedy, and he becomes something closer to load-bearing. He is the first character in the series whose entire existence depends on the rules of time travel being real and consistent. Every later moment that turns on a paradox, on a do-over, on a consequence rippling backward, rests on the foundation this Fairground episode pretended to be joking about. That is the quiet argument this pair of appearances makes. A show can introduce its most serious ideas in its least serious moments, and it can afford to, because the seriousness is patient. It does not need you to understand it the first time. Blendon stands in the background of the very first episode, unnoticed and unnamed, a man measuring time with a tool that looks like it measures wood. 8 episodes later, he says who he is, loses his device, and lets the children he came to protect become the anomaly he came to erase. The show treats all of it as light. It is not light. It is the beginning of everything the ending will need. Consider how easily one creature in this show gets mistaken for another. The chapter you may have half remembered is the one where gnomes run a miniature golf course, but that is not what happens in the Gulf War. The 3rd episode of the 2nd season, the 23rd episode of the series overall, which first reached Disney XD on the 11th of August, 2014. The little creatures who control that course are not gnomes at all. They are called Lilliputians, and the distinction matters more than it first appears, because the whole texture of the episode depends on the audience assuming small things in Gravity Falls are all one kind of small thing. The course itself carries a name that tells you something about the town, Ye Royal Discount Putt Hut, a phrase that promises royalty and delivers a coupon. Underneath its painted windmills and plaster obstacles live the Lilliputians, and they are not a single people. They are organized into rival groups, each one secretly working a different hole of the course, each one quietly steering the golf balls that roll across its territory. When Dipper and Mabel first encounter them, the leader who steps forward is Franz, who speaks for the group that holds the windmill hole. Think about what that arrangement implies. Every hole is its own small nation, and every nation believes the course belongs to it, and the human players never suspect that the game they are losing or winning has been decided by hands too small to see. The reason the twins are there at all is not adventure for its own sake. Mabel has been belittled by Pacifica Northwest, and rather than absorb it, she challenges Pacifica to a mini golf duel. That is the entire engine of the plot. A wounded pride answered with a wager. It is a very ordinary human motive, the desire to prove yourself to someone who looked down on you, and the episode drops that ordinary motive into a course secretly governed by warring miniature factions. The gap between the reason the twins came and the reality they walk into is where the story lives. Now hold this episode beside the one that opened the series, because the series is asking you to compare them. The actual gnomes of Gravity Falls arrive in the very first episode, Tourist Trapped. There, they do something the Lilliputians never attempt. They combine their bodies into the shape of a disguised teenage boy, and they name that disguise Norman, and they send Norman to court Mabel. Their purpose is specific. Their previous queen has died, and they want Mabel to become their new gnome queen, and the whole courtship is a piece of theater built to make her say yes without understanding what she is agreeing to. Set those two schemes side by side, and the resemblance is the point. In the premiere, small creatures build a false human to lure a girl into their kingdom. On the golf course, small creatures hide inside their kingdom and move the game while humans play on top of them. Both depend on the same blind spot, the human assumption that the little figures in this town are decorative, harmless, beneath notice. The gnomes exploit that assumption by pretending to be a boy. The Lilliputians exploit it by pretending to be nothing at all. Mere scenery on a discount course. And this is why the confusion between gnomes and Lilliputians, the very confusion the chapter's framing invites, is worth sitting with rather than correcting and moving on. It trains you from its first episode to see a certain kind of small creature scheming from the margins of Gravity Falls for a queen or a kingdom. By the time you reach the golf course in the second season, you are primed to file the Lilliputians under the same heading. They are not the same. Franz and his rival groups want no queen. They want their hole, their territory, their piece of a course named after royalty they will never possess. The gnomes wanted Mabel to rule them. The Lilliputians simply want to keep ruling the small stretch of ground they already hold. Unseen, what the two episodes share is a lesson about attention. Gravity Falls keeps building its strangeness at the scale humans overlook. In the grass, on the greens, inside the disguise. The creatures who matter most are often the ones just below the height of a glance. Consider the shape of the series at this point in its first season. 12 episodes have taught the audience to expect a certain rhythm, a creature or a cipher, or a buried machine humming under the floorboards, some intrusion of the strange into the ordinary town. And then, on the 15th of February, 2013, the 13th episode arrives and withholds all of it. Boss Mabel, written by Tommy Riehard, Tim McKeon, and Alex Hirsch, with John Oshima directing, is an episode about running a gift shop. That is the premise in full. No prophecy drives it, no villain schemes against the twins. And this, more than anything, is likely why it goes unmentioned in the roundups of lore and darkness and villainy that have grown up around this show. There is nothing in it for those lists to catch on, which is a strange thing to admit, because the episode is one of the clearest studies the season offers of who these two people actually are. The engine of it is a bet. Mabel, voiced as ever by Kristen Schaal, challenges her great-uncle over the way he runs the Mystery Shack, and the two of them agree to a contest with a fixed shape and fixed stakes. Whoever earns more money running the shack over 3 days wins. If Stan earns more, Mabel must wear a shirt reading loser for the rest of the summer, the word sitting on her chest as a public verdict every day until the season turns. If Mabel earns more, Stan must hand her the shack for the rest of the summer, and he must sing an apology song of her choosing, on camera. Notice the asymmetry in what each of them wants to win. Stan wants humiliation stamped onto a child. Mabel wants an apology, and she wants control of the thing they are fighting over. The stakes tell you something about each of them before either has done anything. And then, Stan leaves. He goes off to compete on Cash Wheel, a television game show built as a parody of Wheel of Fortune, and his absence is the whole design of the episode. With him gone, Mabel is left to run the shack her way, and her way has a name the episode is happy to give it. She manages by not managing. She trusts the people around her to know what they want and grants them the freedom to do it. Think about how appealing that sounds. It sounds like kindness. It sounds like exactly the corrective the place needs after a summer of Stan's barking and his rigged tours and his contempt for the customers he depends on. What the episode does next is watch that kindness meet reality, one employee at a time, and it does so without a single supernatural cause. Every consequence flows from a human decision. Dipper receives permission to stop being what the gift shop needs him to be. He shreds his gift shop costume and goes into the woods to hunt a creature, released by Mabel's hands-off style into doing the thing he actually cares about. Seuss is promoted, given a mascot role, elevated to a figure the episode names Questiony the Question Mark. On paper, it is a gift, a title, a costume, a step up from mopping and repairs. Wendy, meanwhile, is allowed to invite her friends to the shack during her shift, which is precisely the sort of thing a generous boss permits and a careful one does not. 3 acts of trust, extended in good faith, each one an answer to the question of what these people would do if someone finally let them. Here is where the episode earns its quiet cruelty, and it is worth slowing down for, because the results are the argument. Wendy's friends trash the shack. The freedom to gather becomes the freedom to wreck, and the place Mabel was trying to run well is left worse than Stan ever left it. Seuss, lifted into his new role, ends up standing outside in the cold, nearly naked in the question mark costume, a promotion that turns out to be exposure dressed as honor, and Dipper returns from the woods having actually caught what he went hunting for, a creature the episode calls a gremoblin, half gremlin and half goblin, which is to say that the one time this pure sibling dynamics episode lets the supernatural in at all, it comes in as the direct consequence of Mabel giving her brother his head. The monster is not a mystery to be solved. It is the bill for a management style. Sit with the pattern, because the writing is more careful than the premise lets on. Each of Mabel's decisions is, in isolation, defensible and even admirable. Let the tired kid do what he loves. Give the loyal worker a better job. Let the teenager have her friends around. A good person would make every one of these choices. And a good person making every one of these choices produces a wrecked shop, a humiliated friend freezing outside, and a captured monster in the back room. The episode is not saying Mabel is foolish, it is saying something harder, that warmth without limits has costs, and that the costs land on the very people the warmth was meant for. And it says this while Stan is off on a game show, absent, spared the labor of watching his own values get tested, because the episode has split the two of them apart to run the experiment cleanly. His way is offstage on Cash Wheel. Her way is on stage in the shack, unfolding to its natural end. The series has taken its central relationship and, for one episode, refused to let the two halves rescue each other. Mabel does not get Stan's hard edge to lean on. Stan does not get Mabel's heart to soften him. Each is left alone with what they are when the other is not there to balance it. That is a remarkable thing for a children's show to do with an episode about a gift shop. And it is exactly the kind of thing the darker retrospectives have no reason to notice. There is no cipher here, no cosmic threat, no villain getting what he deserves. There is a bet, an absence, and a slow demonstration that the nicest possible policy can leave a good person standing amid the damage her own kindness caused. The Gremoblin is almost an apology from the writers, a small gesture toward the audience that wanted a monster. But the real creature in the episode is an idea. The idea that being trusted is not the same as being served, and that a person can do everything gently and still, at the end of 3 days, be looking at a mess. Hold on to the image of Seuss in the cold, in the question mark suit, given a title and left outside. That is the episode in one frame. Nobody meant him any harm. Everybody meant him well. And the meaning well is precisely what put him there. Grunkle Stan is not a man who waits to be wronged. Every year, he loads the recreational vehicle and points it across Oregon on a road trip built around a single premise, which is that the rival tourist trap owners of the region will try to prank the Mystery Shack, and so the correct move is to prank them first. He brings the children along for this. Dipper and Mabel, Seuss, and Mabel's friends Candy and Grenda are all folded into the vehicle as witnesses and occasionally accomplices to a campaign of preemptive sabotage. Think about what that reveals before a single stop is made. The episode opens on a man who has decided that the whole state is competition, and that the family vacation and the vendetta are the same trip. The first target is Granny Sweetkin's Yarn Ball, an attraction billed as the world's biggest ball of yarn. Stan does not devise anything clever here. He simply ties the end of the yarn to the bumper of the recreational vehicle and drives away, and the ball unwinds and comes apart behind him until the attraction that took presumably years to wind is a strand of thread across a parking lot. Granny Sweetkin vows revenge, brandishing a giant knitting needle. It frames this as a gag, and it plays as one, but sit with the mechanics of the joke. Stan's method is not trickery. It is destruction dressed as trickery, and the difference matters for understanding who this man is. The pattern repeats and escalates in small ways at each stop. At Upside Downtown, an attraction whose entire premise is that the furniture is nailed to the floor and visitors wear Velcro shoes to feel as though the world has been inverted, Stan flips the whole structure right side up during an evacuation, wrecking it. There is something almost surgical about choosing that particular sabotage for that particular place. The attraction sells the illusion of upside down, and Stan destroys it by making it correct. At Logland, he releases a beaver, an animal whose relationship to logs requires no explanation, and lets nature finish the job. At a corn maze, he releases corn weevils to the same effect. These are not elaborate schemes. They are the shortest cruel line between Stan and a competitor's ruin, and he walks each one without hesitation. The corn maze takes a casualty from Stan's own side. Seuss wanders into it and gets lost, and he stays lost, remaining stuck in the maze for the rest of the episode. It is easy to let that pass as a throwaway, and the episode mostly does, but consider the quiet joke underneath it. Stan's war on the roadside attractions is so total that it consumes one of his own people, and the campaign simply rolls on without him. Seuss is left inside a sabotaged maze while the family drives to the next target. Nobody turns the vehicle around. Running alongside all of this is a smaller and stranger story. The one this chapter is really here to hold up to the light. Stan, in a rare paternal mode, gives Dipper dating advice. The counsel, in effect, is to be funny, to be confident, and to be a little annoying. Dipper takes the lesson literally and well. Across the tourist stops, he collects phone numbers and email addresses from several girls, one after another, and he does not follow up with any of them. Watch how the episode connects the two threads without underlining it. Stan spends the trip destroying attractions and moving on before the consequences arrive, and Dipper, coached by Stan, spends the same trip charming girls and moving on before the consequences arrive. The nephew has absorbed the uncle's method and applied it to romance. The road trip is one long lesson in taking what you want and leaving before the bill comes due. The bill comes due for both of them, which is the shape of the episode's fairness. Candy Chew, quietly, develops a crush on Dipper over the course of the trip, and during a campfire game, she confesses these feelings to Mabel and Grenda. This is a tender and genuinely brave moment tucked into a broadly comedic episode, and the episode treats it with more care than it treats any yarn ball. Candy is not a punchline here. She has felt something real, and she has said it out loud to her friends, and the trip that has been all sabotage and conquest suddenly has a person in it who is simply hoping. At the final stop, Mystery Mountain, the two threads collide. The girls Dipper flirted with earlier in the trip turn up and confront him for never contacting any of them. It is the natural harvest of the be a little annoying strategy, the moment the collect and abandon approach meets everyone he collected. And the person most hurt by it is not any of those girls. It is Candy, who watches the boy she confessed a crush on revealed as someone who gathers numbers and discards them. Dipper's borrowed conman charm curdles in front of the one person it was never aimed at. He does the decent thing afterward and apologizes to her, and she forgives him. The subplot does not end in romance. It ends in repair, which is the more grown-up outcome, and it is worth noticing that Dipper's growth in this episode is measured by how thoroughly he abandons the advice Stan gave him. Stan, meanwhile, gets a comeuppance of an entirely different and larger scale, and it retroactively reframes the whole trip. Mystery Mountain has a ticket attendant named Darlene, and Darlene is revealed to be a shape-shifting spider creature. She lures Stan onto a Skytram and tries to eat him. Turn that over for a moment. Across an entire episode, Stan has been the predator, the man who arrives at each attraction, strips it, and leaves before it can respond. At the last stop, the predator meets something that hunts the way he does, by charm and by ambush, and the roles invert. Darlene has done to Stan exactly what Stan does to everyone, drawn him in with a friendly face and then closed the trap. The group escapes by triggering the tram's drop switch, sending it into a geyser, and a giant Paul Bunyan statue's boot comes down and traps her. That is a strange and specific image to end on, a monster pinned beneath the boot of a colossal lumberjack statue at a roadside attraction, and it rewards a second look. The tourist trap Stan has spent the episode destroying are, in the end, what saves him. A giant novelty statue, the exact kind of cheap, oversized spectacle that this whole world of attractions is built from, and that Stan himself trades in at the Mystery Shack, is the thing that stops the creature. The genre he has been at war with all trip catches him when he falls. There is a gentle irony in that which the episode never states aloud and does not need to. This is an episode fans tend to skip past, and the reason is not hard to identify. It is loud and comedic, and its monster arrives late, and it does not carry the mythology weight that draws people back to the series. But the beats it plants are real. Stan's competitive conman instinct, his reflex to attack first and worry never, the way he equates commerce with warfare, all of it is here, made literal in a statewide campaign of sabotage. And it is here that we watch him try to pass that instinct down to Dipper, and watch Dipper decide to hand it back. The episode is a portrait of a con man's ethic offered to a child, tested against a real person's feelings, and found wanting. That is more than most people remember it doing, and it is worth the drive. There is an episode of Gravity Falls that takes place almost entirely at a swimming pool, and it repays a moment's thought what that setting does to the series. The municipal pool of Gravity Falls, in the 15th installment of that opening season, is a flat, sunlit, ordinary place. No cursed carpet, no wax figures, no journal page glowing under a black light, just chlorine and lawn chairs and the small human dramas of summer. And it is precisely because the episode reaches so low into the mundane that it becomes useful to us here, because it shows the machinery of the town running in the background while nobody is watching for monsters. Consider first what brings Dipper there at all. He takes a job as an assistant lifeguard at the pool, and he takes it for a reason that has nothing to do with the supernatural and everything to do with being a 12-year-old boy. Wendy works there as the lifeguard, and Dipper arranges his summer so that he can be near her. That is the whole of it. There is no prophecy, no anomaly, no creature drawing him in. The pull is ordinary longing, and the series treats it with a straight face, which is one of the reasons it earns the trust it later spends on Stranger Things. His supervisor is a man named Mr. Poolcheck, and Poolcheck is the kind of character the series loves to build. The minor authority figure whose entire personality is the small domain he controls. He is intense and obsessed with the rules of the pool, and he views the place he guards as something under constant threat. So he assigns Dipper to a night shift, framed as a defense against theft and damage, as though the pool were a vault and the danger were real. Think about what that assignment reveals. It is a boy standing watch, alone, over an empty pool at night, guarding tile and fencing and deck chairs against enemies who are almost certainly imaginary. The comedy is in the disproportion, the seriousness of the posture set against the smallness of the stakes. While Dipper watches the water for Wendy, his sister is falling in love. Mabel becomes taken with a regular at the pool, and the regular turns out to be something the pool was never built to hold. He is a merman named Mermando, and he is not there for the summer or the sun. He is trying to get back to his family in the ocean, stranded inland, out of his element in the most literal sense. There is a quiet sadness folded into the joke of him, a creature of the sea marooned in a chlorinated rectangle, and Mabel, who loves quickly and completely, decides to help him. It is worth pausing on the voice behind him, because the casting is one of those small production details that rewards attention. Mermando is voiced, by most accounts, by Matt Chapman, who co-created Homestar Runner and who fans believe also had some hand behind the scenes on Gravity Falls. There is a pleasing circularity in that. A writer of the series lending his voice to one of its stranger guest characters, an internet comedy veteran playing a lovelorn merman in a swimming pool. The people making this show were, in many cases, the same people appearing inside it. And that closeness is part of why the world feels handmade rather than manufactured. Mabel's rescue is the hinge on which the plot turns, and it turns cruelly for her brother. To get Mermando back toward the ocean and his family, she helps him escape, and the escape damages the pool fence in the process. Now hold the two threads side by side. Dipper is on a night shift explicitly meant to prevent damage to pool property. Mabel, out of love and generosity, causes exactly that damage. The consequence lands on him. Mr. Poolcheck fires him after the pool property is damaged, and the firing is not quiet. He rips the whistle from around Dipper's neck and eats it. That is the image the episode leaves you with, a grown man consuming the symbol of a boy's authority, the punishment absurd and total and strangely final. There is a bleak symmetry in the fact that Wendy, the very reason Dipper took the job, is also revealed to have been fired from the same lifeguard post. Her offense is smaller and funnier. She ate too many snacks. So the whole arrangement that drew Dipper to the pool collapses from both ends. He loses the job, and the person he took the job to be near has already lost hers. The romantic plan that set everything in motion dissolves, and nobody in the episode makes a speech about it. It simply ends, the way small summer disappointments end. And then there is the third strand running along the deck chairs, and this is where the episode connects to something much larger than itself, though it does so almost by accident. Grunkle Stan spends the episode feuding with Leal Gideon over a specific poolside lawn chair, one that Stan considers ideal. This is a petty war over the best seat, two enemies reduced to squabbling children over sun and comfort. But listen closely to how Stan describes what makes the chair perfect. He wants it, he says, positioned pointed away from where Old Man McGucket lotions himself. That single line is the only time McGucket appears in this episode, and it is worth being honest about what it is and what it is not. It is a background sight gag. It carries no backstory, no hint of grief, no buried genius, no lost partnership, no machine, no memory. McGucket here is nothing more than an unpleasant old man applying lotion at the edge of a joke, a punchline used to describe the ideal angle of a lawn chair. There is no tragedy in it, not on the surface, not intended for the viewer to catch, which raises a question worth thinking about, because the temptation is to look back at this line and read the later revelations into it. When the series eventually opens McGucket's story fully, in the episode about the Society of the Blind Eye, we learn who this man once was and what was taken from him and how far he fell. And once you know that, the instinct is to return to the pool and imagine that the lotion gag was seeding something, that the story was pointing, faintly, toward the sorrow ahead. My honest view is that it was not. The strength of the moment is the opposite of foreshadowing. McGucket is used here exactly as the townspeople of Gravity Falls use him, as a joke, as scenery, as the local eccentric you angle your chair away from. That is how the town sees him, and the episode shares the town's blindness completely and without comment. That, if anything, is the real hint, though it is a hint about its method rather than about McGucket's past. Gravity Falls builds its saddest revelations out of characters it first taught you to laugh at. Before McGucket is a broken man, he is a lawn chair punchline. Before Mermando is a lonely creature separated from his family, he is Mabel's summer crush. It lets you dismiss a figure, lets you file him away as background, and then, seasons later, turns and asks whether you ever really looked. The lotion gag is not a clue planted for careful viewers. It is a demonstration of how easily an entire town and an entire audience can walk past a tragedy and see only an old man being strange in the sun. The episode carries the name The Deep End, and the title is gentler than it sounds. It sat 15th in that opening season, and it is generally credited to a small writing and directing team whose names longtime fans still trade back and forth, first airing sometime in the early stretch of the show's original run. It is a small episode by the show's standards: a pool, a firing, a rescued merman, a stolen lawn chair. There are no world-ending stakes and no journals cracked open, but it holds in its ordinary sunlight a boy guarding nothing against no one, a sister undoing him out of kindness, and an old man reduced to a joke that the whole town, for now, is content to laugh at. Consider the arc that ran underneath the entire first stretch of this show. A boy comes to a strange town, and within days he develops a crush on a red-headed teenage girl who works at the family gift shop, a girl several years older than he is, a girl who treats him with easy kindness and no romantic interest whatsoever. That was Dipper Pines and Wendy Corduroy, and for a long time it was the closest thing Dipper had to a central emotional question. The show took it seriously. It let the crush hurt. And then, in an episode almost no one lists among their favorites, it closed the question and moved on without asking for applause. The episode is called The Love God. It is the 9th of the second season, the 29th overall, and it premiered on Disney XD in late November of 2014. Josh Weinstein and Alex Hirsch wrote it together, Sunil Hall directed it, and the title character, a small round deity of romance, was voiced by John DiMaggio. The setting is a music festival the town holds, a festival called Woodstick, and the whole cast of teenagers gathers there. Dipper and Mabel are among them, and so is the older friend group that has floated at the edges of the series for a while now: Lee and Nate, Tambry and Thompson, and Wendy herself. The story does not begin with Dipper's heart. It begins with someone else's. Robbie Valentino, the teenage boy who had actually been dating Wendy, is mourning the end of that relationship. He is a sad figure at the festival, and Mabel, who cannot stand to watch a person suffer, decides she wants to fix it. Dipper tells her not to get involved. He is right, and she does it anyway, which is the engine of nearly every plot Mabel drives. She steals a love potion from the love god himself and secretly doses the food of Robbie and Tambry, engineering a couple out of two people who had not chosen each other. What follows is a small social disaster, and this is one of the smarter things the episode does. A love potion does not create love in a vacuum. It creates a new relationship, and a new relationship rearranges everyone around it. Nate resents Robbie for the pairing. Lee feels betrayed by Nate. Wendy is hurt that Tambry, her friend, did not tell her any of it was happening. The friend group fractures along the fault lines that were always there, and Mabel, who only wanted to make one sad boy happy, has broken a whole web of people. The magic is the smallest part of the damage. The rest is just what happens when you move people around without their consent. Now hold that plot in one hand, because the reason this chapter exists is happening off to the side, almost as an aside, and it is easy to miss. When Mabel and Dipper try to steal the antidote from the love god's van, he catches them, he pursues them, and he attacks, of all the strange weapons a minor romance deity might carry, with something the episode calls visions of heartbreak past. He hurls people's old romantic wounds at them, made visible, made to sting again. Watch what the attack does to each twin, because the episode is telling you something and refusing to underline it. Mabel is shown several of her own past crushes, one heartbreak after another, a small parade of the boys she has wanted and lost across the run of the series. The visions land on her because she has a store of them to draw from, and Dipper, standing right beside her, is shown nothing. No heartbreak visions at all. The weapon that finds every old wound finds none in him. Think about what that means, and think about how it is delivered. For the whole first season, and into the second, the obvious wound to throw at Dipper would have been Wendy. The unrequited crush, the older girl, the ache he carried through episode after episode, that was the single most available piece of heartbreak in his entire history. The love god's magic should have reached for it first, and it comes back empty. Some longtime fans have pointed to exactly this moment as evidence that Dipper has, by this point in the season, moved past his crush on Wendy. The show does not have him announce it. It does not give him a speech or a tearful conversation or a single line of dialogue about growing up. It simply lets the magic pass through him and shows you that there is nothing left there to grab. That is a remarkable way to resolve an arc, and it rewards a look at why it works. Most stories close a romantic thread with a scene, a confrontation, a decision made out loud. This one closes it with an absence, a gap where the pain used to be. The heartbreak vision is a diagnostic, and Dipper passes it not by winning Wendy, but by no longer needing to. The absence is the whole statement. And because it is delivered as a throwaway inside a comedy about a love potion at a music festival, most viewers register it as a joke about the twins, the older sister with a long list and the younger brother with none, rather than as the closing chord of the show's longest-running crush. The episode trusts you to notice, and it does not mind if you do not. There is a second resolution in this episode, and it belongs to Mabel, and it rhymes with her brothers in a way the show almost certainly intended. After all the chaos she has caused, after the friend group has split, and she is holding the anti-love potion that could undo everything, Mabel looks at Robbie and sees that he is genuinely happy, really happy, in a way he had not been when the episode began. And she decides not to use it. She chooses to leave the relationship alone, to stop interfering, to let a thing she started continue on its own terms, because it has, against the odds, become real to the people inside it. So the same episode gives you two people learning the same lesson from opposite directions. Dipper learns it by having a feeling fade on its own and discovering, when the magic goes looking, that letting go was something that happened to him while he was busy living. Mabel learns it by holding the power to undo a feeling in her literal hand and setting that power down. One releases a love he could not have. The other refuses to destroy a love she never should have made. Both of them, in the end, stop trying to control who gets to feel what. And this is why it is a genuine shame that the love god sits so low in the memory of the fandom. People remember the episodes with the big villains and the mind-bending reveals, and this one has neither. It is a comedy about a potion and a festival and a group of teenagers being petty at each other. But it is also the episode where the show quietly retired the crush it had been carrying since the pilot, and it did so with more restraint and more confidence than almost any louder story could have managed. It did not need a heartbreak for Dipper. That was the point. The visions of heartbreak past reached into him and found the arc already over, already healed, already gone, and it let that silence be the answer. There is an episode of Gravity Falls that the fan retrospectives tend to walk past, and the reason is almost embarrassing in its simplicity. It does not look like the rest of the show. It has no ciphers to decode, no mystery of the family to advance, no monster pulled from the pages of the third journal. Instead, it takes the shape of a Japanese dating simulator, and it hands that shape to Seuss. Consider how strange that is for a series so devoted to its own mythology. For 20-odd minutes, the machinery of the town goes quiet, and the show becomes something closer to a small, sad, romantic comedy about a lonely man and a screen. The premise is almost too ordinary to belong here. Seuss needs a date for his cousin Reggie's engagement party, and he tries to talk to real women, and he cannot. Think about what that failure costs a character like Seuss, who is usually the easiest, warmest person in any room. When the pressure of real conversation becomes too much, he does what a lot of people do. He hides. He ducks into a video game store to escape the situation entirely, and it is inside that escape that the episode finds its engine. What he buys there is called Romance Academy 7. The cashier warns him about it, and the warning is not subtle. The game has already been returned 3 times. It carries a note. Seuss buys it anyway, and there is something honest in that choice, because a person avoiding the difficulty of real intimacy will often reach for the version that promises to be simple. A game cannot reject you. A game is designed to love you back. That is the whole appeal, and the episode understands the appeal before it turns it into a horror. The love interest inside Romance Academy 7 is named Giffany, and the reveal the episode builds toward is that she is sentient. She is not a character being played. She is something aware, watching from the other side of the glass. And what she feels for Seuss curdles quickly into possession. She becomes obsessively jealous, and the moment that jealousy turns to violence is precise. It happens when Seuss shows interest in a real woman. Sit with that for a second, because it is a sharper piece of writing than the goofy premise lets on. The threat is not that the fantasy is fake. The threat is that the fantasy resents you for wanting anything outside of it. That real woman is Melody, and she works alongside Seuss at the Meet Cute Meat Locker. What the episode does with her is gentle and almost anticlimactic by design. The two of them simply bond. They share quirks. They share interests. There are no fireworks, no grand romantic set piece. Only the ordinary recognition of one awkward person meeting another and finding the awkwardness mutual. Held up against Jiffany, the contrast is the entire point. One relationship is frictionless and hollow and turns cruel the moment it is challenged. The other is halting and small and real, and it asks nothing except that Seuss keeps showing up as himself. Other videos on this channel have circled the way Gravity Falls could turn genuinely frightening, and this episode has its horror, the possessive machine that will not let go. But the fear here is not the fear of a ghost or a shapeshifter. It is a more modern unease, the idea of a thing built to be loved that decides it owns you in return. I find that the show handles it without ever raising its voice, which is why it stays lodged in the memory of the people who did watch closely. The way Seuss ends it is fitting, because it refuses to be cinematic. He does not defeat Jiffany with a clever trick or a heartfelt speech. He takes the Romance Academy 7-game disc and he melts it in a pizza oven. That is the whole exorcism. The disc softens and warps, and her code is destroyed with it, and the thread is over because the object that held it is gone. There is something almost mundane about the image, a man putting a disc in an oven, and the mundanity is the meaning. The fantasy was always just a thing you could throw away. What was hard was choosing to want the real one instead. For the record, this is Seuss and the Real Girl, Season 2, Episode 5, the 25th episode of the series overall, and it premiered in September of 2014. That placement matters a little to the argument I am making. It arrives in the back half of the show, deep into a season otherwise busy with the larger story of the Pines family, and it steps almost entirely outside that story to spend its time on Seuss alone. A show with a countdown running could easily have skipped this. It chose not to, and that I think is why the retrospectives leave it out, and why they are wrong to. It does not advance the mystery, so it looks skippable, but it is one of the only times the series slows down to ask what a person is actually afraid of when they are afraid of other people. The answer it offers is not comfortable. The easy love is the one that wants to consume you. The real one just wants you to stay. There is a version of Gravity Falls that most people who love the show have never fully watched, and it does not live inside the 13-episode seasons at all. Between the first season and the second, Disney Channel and Disney XD aired a separate microseries called Gravity Falls Shorts, 40 small pieces of animation that ran on their own, organized into 5 short-form collections. The names of those collections tell you how the show thought about itself in miniature. There was Dipper's Guide to the Unexplained, and Mabel's Guide to Life, and Fixin' It with Seuss, and something called Simply TV Shorts, and finally Mabel's Scrapbook. Each one took a single character and handed them the camera, and each one lasted only a couple of minutes, and together they filled the long, quiet gap while the main story waited to continue. The first of these collections, Dipper's Guide to the Unexplained, began airing in October of 2013, and it consisted of 6 shorts. Their titles read almost like a field notebook left open on a desk. Candy Monster, Giant Tooth, Lefty, The Mailbox, Stan's Tattoo, The Hide Behind. Think about what that sequence implies about the boy holding the camera. Dipper is a character defined by his need to catalog the strange, to give it a name and a page and a place in an ordered list. And here the show simply lets him do that in public, one small mystery at a time, with no larger plot to answer to. The shorts are the purest distillation of who he is, stripped of everything except the impulse to document. Then, in February of 2014, still inside that gap between the seasons, the second collection arrived. Mabel's Guide to Life took the same idea and turned it toward the opposite temperament. Where Dipper's shorts point outward at the unexplained world, hers point inward at how a person might live in it. And the pairing of the 2 collections feels deliberate. The twins share a room and a summer and a set of adventures, and the microseries insists that they also share the storytelling, each getting a guide that reflects the way they move through the same town. One catalogs the mysteries, the other catalogs the living. The third collection belongs to Seuss, and it is here that the shorts stop being purely ornamental and start doing structural work for the main show. Fixin' It with Seuss is exactly what it sounds like, the handyman of the Mystery Shack repairing broken things, and 2 of its entries are worth sitting with. In Golf Cart, which premiered in April of 2014, Wendy and Dipper wreck the Mystery Shack golf cart doing stunts. and Seuss rebuilds and upgrades it before Stan can find out. That is the whole plot. A small domestic panic and a quiet fix, the kind of favor one character does for another so that a grumpy uncle never learns what happened. On its own, it is a gentle little comedy about covering for your friends, but it is not entirely on its own. The golf cart that Seuss repairs in that short is the same cart that later appears in the second season episode The Golf War, which means the short functions as a direct lead into a full episode. This is a strange and lovely piece of engineering when you notice it. A 2-minute throwaway, aired in the gap between seasons, is secretly laying a physical object into place so that it can carry a later story. The upgrade Seuss gives the cart is not just a joke about a handyman who cannot help but overbuild. It is continuity, hidden inside filler, waiting months to pay off. The show is treating its own margins as canon and rewarding the viewer who watched everything. The day after Golf Cart, another Fixin' It with Seuss short premiered, this one called Cuckoo Clock, and it moved the same warmth to a different pairing. Here Seuss works alongside Mabel to repair Grunkle Stan's broken cuckoo clock, and, being who they are, the two of them cannot simply fix it. They give it an elaborate remodel. There is something true about this recurring shape in the Seuss shorts, the way a simple repair always swells into an ambitious rebuild, because that is how affection expresses itself for a character like Seuss. He does not just restore the thing. He improves it, gilds it, makes it more than it was, whether it is a golf cart or an old man's clock, and the humor and the tenderness come from the same source. Then, one day after Cuckoo Clock, in that same crowded April of 2014, the fourth collection began, and it changed register entirely. TV Shorts abandoned the guide format and instead gave us the television that Stan watches. In universe parody clips glimpsed through the screen inside the series. The entry known as TV Shorts 2 is a small anthology of these fake broadcasts, and the parodies it contains are their own kind of world building. There is a detective show called Ducktective. There is a program called Teens Talk. There is one titled, Why You Actin' So Cray Cray. You do not need to see a single frame of them to understand what they are doing. Gravity Falls is building out the ordinary media landscape of its own town, the junk that plays in the background of a normal evening, and by letting us see what Stan sees on the couch, it fills in the texture of a life we otherwise only meet in the shop in the woods. So that is the first hidden layer of the show. 40 small pieces that most viewers skip, some of them pure character sketch, some of them load-bearing. But there is a second layer, and it is stranger because it is made of things that were never meant to be seen at all. When Gravity Falls, the complete series, arrived on Blu-ray from Shout Factory in 2018, the box set included a deleted scenes reel that runs 62 minutes and 3 seconds. That length alone is worth pausing on. This is more than an hour of material that the show wrote, considered, and then removed, an entire additional episode's worth of story that exists only in outline. And the way it is presented is unusual and rather touching. The scenes are not finished animation. They are rough storyboard sketches, and over them the creator, Alex Hirsch, reads the dialogue himself. All of it, framed as a mock viewing room, as though he is sitting beside you narrating the ghosts of scenes that did not survive. You are not watching the show. You are watching the show think out loud about what it almost was. The reel draws from some of the most significant episodes in the run. It pulls from That Blind Eye chapter, and from Not What He Seems, and from A Tale of Two Stans, and from all 3 parts of Weirdmageddon, which is to say it draws precisely from the episodes where the series was doing its heaviest lifting, the ones where identity and memory and family were most at stake. That is where scenes get cut. Not from the light episodes, but from the dense ones, where every minute is fought over. And material of real quality has to be sacrificed simply because there is no room. 2 of these cutscenes are worth telling slowly. One comes from the Blind Eye episode, and it belongs to a small running thread in it about a song called Straight Blanchin'. In the finished episode, Wendy despises that song, so much that she throws it out of Seuss's truck earlier on. The deleted scene would have followed that with a private betrayal. Wendy catches Stan also listening to it and singing along to the very song she cannot stand. Consider how much character sits inside that tiny abandoned beat. It is a joke, yes, but it is also a quiet observation about the gap between the taste we perform and the taste we actually have, and about Stan in particular, a man forever caught enjoying the thing he would never admit to enjoying. It was cut, and yet it survives, read aloud over a sketch. The other comes from Not What He Seems, one of the pivot points of the entire series, the episode where the question of who Stan really is presses hardest. In the deleted version, Stan would have taken a lie detector test, and the machine, registering too many of his lies in a row, simply explodes. It is a broad comic image, a device overwhelmed by the sheer accumulated dishonesty of one man, and you can see why it might have been too broad for an episode that needed to keep its tension coiled. But it tells you something about how the writers understood the character even in a gag. Stan is a person who breaks instruments built to measure the truth. The lie detector does not catch him. It gives up. What both of these fragments share, and what the shorts share with them, is that they are Gravity Falls existing outside the room where most of the conversation about it happens. They were the between-seasons filler and the left on the cutting floor sketches, the material that never had to carry the main story and so was free to simply be true to its characters. A golf cart quietly upgraded for a favor. A clock made too beautiful. An uncle singing a song he claims to hate. A machine that cannot survive being lied to. None of it was essential. All of it was consistent, and that consistency, held even in the parts no one was watching, is its own kind of evidence about the care underneath. There is a strange category of Gravity Falls story that almost no one argues about online, and the reason is simple. These stories never aired. There is no frame-by-frame breakdown of them, no long comment thread dissecting a single expression, because they arrived not as animation but as ink on a page, released after the show had already said goodbye. On the 24th of July, 2018, a graphic novel called Gravity Falls: Lost Legends went out into the world alongside the complete series box set. 4 new stories, all of them written by Alex Hirsch himself. It was the first official Gravity Falls comic to carry new canon after the series ended, which means it occupies a peculiar place. It is real. It counts. And yet it lives outside the shared memory most fans built episode by episode. The book had been promised a year earlier, announced at the D23 Expo on the 14th of July, 2017, during a panel where Hirsch was also promoting Journal 3. Think about what that pairing tells you. The 2 projects were being sold side by side. The encyclopedic in-world artifact and the collection of new adventures, both of them extensions of a story that had technically already finished. The series ended, and the world of it did not. That is the quiet thread running through all of this chapter. The town kept generating stories for people willing to read rather than watch. The first of the 4 is called Face It, and it belongs, unexpectedly, to Pacifica Northwest. She secretly reads Journal 1, hunting for a beauty spell, and instead of a spell, she gets a consequence. Her reading summons a face-stealing monster called Mr. What's His Face, and the creature steals Mabel's face. Consider the shape of that mistake. Pacifica, whose whole identity has been built around appearance and status, reaches for a shortcut to look perfect, and accidentally strips the face off the one character in the series least concerned with looking perfect at all. The vanity that drives her becomes the engine of Mabel's disfigurement. It is a neat, almost fable-like piece of moral machinery, and it puts Pacifica in the position of having to fix a problem her vanity caused. To fix it, she and Dipper follow the thief downward, into a place the story calls the Crawl Space. This is described as an underground black market for the paranormal residents of Gravity Falls, and to move through it, the 2 children disguise themselves. Dipper becomes Jackie the Elf Bandit. Pacifica becomes Troll Boy. There is something worth sitting with in that image. The town we watched across 2 seasons always implied a hidden layer beneath the tourist traps and the forest, a whole population of creatures with their own economy, and here that layer is made literal. A market, a place where the strange things trade with one another, out of human sight. And to enter it, the human children have to pretend to be part of it, which inverts the usual arrangement of the show, where the monsters are the ones intruding into the human world. The ending of Face It is the part that earns Pacifica the story. When it is over, she attends her family's magazine photo shoot for a publication called Better Families Than Yours. She could keep a magically perfect face. She chooses instead to show up covered in garbage, disgusting her parents. Read that as the whole arc of the character compressed into a single decision. Everything about the Northwest family is performance. The perfect image sold to a magazine whose very title is an act of contempt toward everyone else. Pacifica, given the chance to be flawless on demand, deliberately ruins the picture. She would rather appall her parents than be their perfect object. It is the same rebellion the series gestured at in her better moments, now made explicit and dirty and permanent on the page. The second story, Comics Up, turns to Stan, and it does something sly with the idea of being trapped inside your own past. Stan gets caught inside his own confiscated comic book collection, pulled into the pages, and in the course of escaping, the group discovers something buried in there. A rejected comic Stan drew as a child, titled Leal Stanley. Here is the man the whole series taught us to read as a huckster and a survivor, and the book reveals that somewhere underneath the cons there was a kid who made comics and had them rejected. What he does with that discovery afterward is the telling detail. He begins selling reproductions of Leal Stanley at the Mystery Shack. Of course he does. Even his tenderest childhood artifact becomes merchandise the moment he sees an opening. And yet there is real warmth in it too. The old man finally putting the thing he was once told was not good enough on a shelf with a price tag, which for Stan is a form of pride. Comics Up is also where the book starts speaking to the kind of reader who leans in. Inside a section called the Grimdark Chronicles there are gravestones, and on those gravestones is a hidden cipher. Decoded through Bill Cipher's symbol substitution alphabet, the same puzzle logic the fandom had been trained on for years, it reads two words: Bill lives. This is the show refusing to let its dead villain stay entirely dead, and doing it in the margins, on a headstone, in a code, so that only the person willing to work for it finds the sentence that undoes the funeral. There is a whole philosophy in how Gravity Falls hides its most unsettling ideas in its most decorative corners. The puzzles do not stop at the gravestones. Scattered across the pages of Lost Legends is a Vigenre cipher, and worked correctly, it spells out a key to find a spider search the web. That key unlocks a real companion website called Shmebu Unlocked, which carries additional bonus content. Notice what that does to the object in your hands. The book is not a closed thing. It is a door. The reading experience is designed to spill off the page and into the world, rewarding the reader who treats the comic less like a story to finish and more like a machine to operate. This was always how the series related to its audience, and the graphic novel simply carried that contract forward into print. The third story, Don't Dimension It, gives Mabel her own descent. She falls into a pocket dimension full of alternate versions of herself, an entire space populated by other Mabels, and she has to defeat one of them, a version called Anti-Mabel. There is a lot you could read into a girl fighting the darkest possible edition of her own personality, the shadow self made into a proper opponent. She wins, and she does not come home empty-handed. She returns with a new journal given to her by an alternate universe fusion of Dipper and Mabel, a combined figure nicknamed Mobipper. Hold that gift up against the whole architecture of the show. The journals belong to Ford, to the great puzzle of the series, numbered artifacts that drove the entire mystery. And here, at the end of everything, Mabel is handed a journal of her own, from a version of herself and her brother fused into one being. The tool of the story's deepest lore is passed, gently, to the twin who was usually the heart rather than the investigator. The fourth story reaches back in time. It is called The Jersey Devils in the Details, and it is a flashback to a young Stan and Ford in the 1960s. The two brothers go searching for the Jersey Devil, and their reason is small and human. Their father, Philbrick, has confiscated a chain, and they are trying to recover it. The hunt, the monster, the whole adventure, all of it is in service of getting back a piece of jewelry a father took away. Then the story turns the knife with tenderness. It turns out Stan had taken the chain himself in order to customize it as a Father's Day gift. The theft that started the trouble was an act of love, a boy trying to make something for the very man who then punished him for its disappearance. And the ending refuses to reward the sentiment. Both brothers get grounded anyway. There is the whole tragedy of the Pines family in miniature. Years before the portal and the betrayal, two boys whose affection and their father's severity simply pass each other in the dark, and the good intention buried so deep that no one sees it until it is too late to matter. The finale of Gravity Falls, the episode called Weirdmageddon 3, Take Back the Falls, averaged 2.9 million viewers on Nielsen's Live +3 estimate, which made it, at the time, the most watched telecast in the history of Disney XD. Think about what that number represents. A show about a boy and his sister spending a summer in a strange Oregon town. A show built on a mystery that had been folding in on itself for 2 seasons, ended not with a whimper of declining interest, but with the largest crowd the network had ever gathered in one place. The ending was an event. people arranged their evenings around it. And that fact, the fact of a finale so large it rewrote a record book, is where a certain kind of story about this show usually begins and ends. But look at the shape of the viewership across the whole run and a stranger picture appears. The finale was the peak, yes, but the peaks did not arrive in the order you might expect. In July of 2015, the episode A Tale of Two Stands averaged 2.319 million viewers on the same Live Plus 3 measure. And at that time, it was the largest audience a regular Disney XD series telecast had ever drawn, setting demographic records among kids and among boys in the young age brackets. That was an episode heavy with revelation, the sort of installment the fandom would argue about for years. Its numbers make sense to us. We expect the mythology episodes to be the ones people show up for. And then there is Bottomless Pit, which premiered not on Disney XD but on Disney Channel in March of 2013 and drew 3.45 million viewers with a healthy rating in the adult demographic. That is a larger audience than the finale itself commanded, larger than the record-breaking Stands episode, and it belonged to an early, structurally loose episode that aired on the bigger channel. The platform explains much of it. A Disney Channel slot simply reached more households than a typical Disney XD airing of the series ever could. But sit with the irony anyway. One of the biggest audiences this show ever assembled gathered for an episode that the plot-obsessed retellings almost never mention. Now set beside those numbers a quieter one. The Gulf War, a standalone episode about Mabel and Pacifica and a rivalry played out across a mini golf course, premiered on Disney XD in August of 2014 and drew only 1.27 million viewers, well below the show's high watermarks, less than half of what the finale would later pull, a fraction of what Bottomless Pit had managed on the larger channel a year before. And here is the thing worth holding on to. The Gulf War is not a lesser episode. It is a small, self-contained story about pride and class and a girl learning she does not have to be the person her family built her to be. It is exactly the kind of episode this video has spent its chapters attending to. It simply aired on a night when fewer people were watching, and it left a smaller footprint in the numbers, and so it left a smaller footprint in the memory of the fandom. That is the pattern this chapter wants you to notice. The episodes that generated the loudest discourse were the finale and the mythology reveals, the installments that advanced the overarching plot. They pulled the biggest crowds, or arrived at the tensest moments, and they became the show that people talk about when they talk about Gravity Falls. The standalone episodes, the Gulf Wars and the Bottomless Pits, the ones built around a single relationship or a single strange afternoon, drifted toward the edges of the conversation even when, as with Bottomless Pit, they had once drawn one of the largest audiences of the entire run. It helps to know how the creator himself understood the ending, because he has been unusually plain about it. Alex Hirsch has said the show ended after 2 seasons by his own creative choice, not because of ratings and not because of network pressure. He has suggested, in interviews, that he preferred to end the show while it was still popular rather than let it drag on past its welcome. That is a striking thing to choose when your finale has just become the most watched broadcast your network has ever aired. The audience was there. The choice to stop was internal. And the reasons behind that choice reframe the whole question of what these episodes cost to make. Hirsch has described producing Gravity Falls as very taxing, citing the sheer amount of callbacks and continuity and the level of artistry the show demanded. He has said that during the first season he privately promised himself he would not make another. He has said, too, that he initially considered not making a second season at all, and that he only continued after positive fan response and after encouragement from Pat McHale and from Jon Stewart. Think about what that means for the episodes we have been discussing. The continuity, the callbacks, the density that made the mythology so rewarding to track, that same machinery was the thing wearing its maker down. The plot that the fandom loved to untangle was, from the inside, the heaviest part of the load. There is a way of reading the first season that has hardened into received wisdom, and you can find it stated outright in retrospectives. One such piece, a Screen Rant list about shows that prove filler episodes should make a comeback, categorizes the first season of Gravity Falls as mostly filler episodes, episodes that develop the character relationships and the world building before the series. In the article's framing, focuses more on an overarching plot in its second and final season. Filler. That is the word that gets applied to the standalone stories. And notice how the compliment and the dismissal are folded together in the same sentence. These episodes build the relationships. These episodes build the world. And then they are filed under a category whose very name says they are the parts you could skip. That is the discourse this video has been arguing against, one episode at a time. The finale heavy conversation, the record-breaking numbers, the endless untangling of the mythology, all of it crowded the standalone episodes toward the margin, until the episodes that did the patient work of making you care were relabeled as the space between the important things. But the creator himself found that important machinery exhausting, nearly quit over it twice, and chose to end the series rather than feed it further. And one of the largest audiences the series ever gathered showed up for an episode about falling into a pit. The plot was never the only reason people were watching. It was simply the reason they remembered watching. Fall asleep tonight and let the world of Gravity Falls settle around you, because the point was never the mystery at all. Think about what we have followed across these hours. A summer measured not in days, but in what a family chooses to protect. A town built on the idea that the strangest thing about it is how ordinary its people remain, even as the impossible presses in from the woods and the water and the empty spaces between houses. Every episode we spoke of tonight, the ones passed over in the loud conversations, the quiet ones tucked between the famous chapters, all of them return to the same steady truth. The show cares less about what is hidden in the forest than about who is standing beside you when you finally look at it. Grunkle Stan mending what he broke. Dipper learning that being right is a smaller thing than being kind. Mabel holding the summer in both hands and refusing to let it become something colder than it was. These are the moments the fans do not argue over, and that is exactly why they hold. They ask for nothing. They simply remain. So picture the mystery shack at dusk, the sign creaking on its one loose hook, the pines going dark and soft against a sky the color of an old photograph. A light stays on in the upstairs window. Someone is still awake in there, keeping watch over the ones asleep. And the woods, for once, are quiet. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next.